And we want this. And we want, okay, Rob, how is that sounding now? I think that I fixed it. I believe I've resolved this. Can you please confirm? This is the nature of starting something new. And I ran this before when I first switched this. Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate that. That's really helpful. So today, what I'm going to do is just a little bit of background here, and then we're going to start to talk about empathy. And the way I want to begin, thanks, Sinai. The way I want to begin talking about this is I want to kind of model something, and then we're going to notice what happens as I do that, and then we'll get into some of the topics today. So a little bit of background, the vision that I have for the Ontological Leadership Network is that it's a place where an ontological conversation around leadership can kind of be held, which, as I say those words, sounds almost meaningless. Like what does that even mean? You just said more words that don't mean anything. What that means is that the default leadership conversation tends to operate in the realm of the conceptual. And as you've probably noticed, in the realm of the conceptual, this stuff is super easy. Like we read all of these kind of these ideas, these thoughts, these things that we can do to support, to be better leaders, and we nod our heads. We're like, yeah, of course I should eat last. Of course, as a servant leadership, I should develop more leadership. That always makes complete sense. Of course, we should empathize with our employees. That helps them feel better, blah, blah, blah. That's never where leadership is developed, because in the concept, it always is easy. And in the practice, it's always very challenging. And that's where we want to be having these conversations. Ontological leadership is about bringing us to those edges, supporting us to practice leadership as a function of who we're being. So that's the intention I have for these calls. Ideally, over time, I'd like to start to have other people come onto them, possibly do some live coaching, possibly just have like more of a discussion support. For today, because we're kind of getting this off the ground, we're starting this off, it's just going to be me speaking, but this doesn't necessarily have to be the way it always goes. And I would really love to hear feedback. So if you're someone in our group and you're getting a sense of this, it'd be really good to know, like, what would you like more of? What would you like less of? How is it listening to Adam talk? Do you want him to just get straight to the point? Do you want him to provide background and vision and stuff like that? Anything along those lines really supports a couple things. It supports us crafting something, like co-creating something together that actually supports all of us, rather than just me shoving something forward. And it also supports the practice of leadership transparently, because you get to witness how I adapt and work with feedback as it comes in the moment, and we can all grow from that process. So that's my hope. That's what we're aiming for. I'm just going to turn a fan on here. Get a little flow of air through here. Yeah, that's good stuff. Okay. Hopefully that's not too loud. And if it is, I don't know what to do about it. So that's that. Okay. So to start us off, I'm going to introduce this concept of empathy. That's what we're going to be talking about. That's what our topic has been throughout all of this month. And I find empathy is a funny topic for me for a few reasons. The main being that most of my life I've thought, what a waste of fucking time. What a bunch of bullshit. What's the point? It seems very inefficient. Why are we sitting here kind of rehashing what happened when we could be putting our attention and energy towards doing what needs to happen next? Why are we taking time to connect? Why can't we just get things going? Why can't we do that? So if that's relatable to you in any way, great, then this will probably be a valuable conversation. And if not, then great, because that might provide you an opportunity to empathize a little bit more with the people that do that. You know, it's kind of funny because what happens is we talk about how important empathy is, and then a lot of us who really value that, we immediately lose our ability to empathize with those that don't have much empathy. We instead hold like, well, you should just have empathy. What's your problem? You suck. You're a bad boss. You're a bad leader. You have no soft skills, without realizing like, oh, that's the point where I lost my ability to empathize. Holy mackerel. So we'll dive into that a little bit. So the way I want to start this off is to share kind of what's been going on for me over the last maybe month in particular. One of the things that is really significant is that my mother-in-law passed away. And that's that's caused a lot of, well, just a lot of everything, frankly, a lot of chaos, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of struggle, a lot of challenges. It's been very heavy. It's meant that there's a lot of grief in my house. And while as the spouse, I'm not as directly impacted, I'm very much in it with my beloved. And so it's done a couple of things. Like one of the things is it's called me forward to lead more. It's demanded that I lead more in the programs that Bay and I run together. It's demanded more of me in terms of like building my business, doing all this sort of stuff. And it's also kind of brought me to a point of maybe I guess I would call it breakdown. Before the breakthrough that we're trying to create, we have to have a breakdown. And the breakdown is that part where you are letting go of the old patterned ways of being that brought you here so you can create something new. You're clear on what you want to create next, but you're not yet clear on how to do it. You're just clear that the old ways no longer work. And so that's slowly been falling away from me. And I've been in this practice of sort of trying to surrender, trying to let them go. But unfortunately, the nature of surrender is that it's not something we can intellectually do. We try to tell ourselves like, just surrender, just let go, Adam. But that's not how it works. The way surrender works is that we resist, we fight, we hold on until eventually we can do so no longer. And then we go, fuck it. And that's the moment where surrender becomes available. And the only way to get there is to sit through all of that fighting, to stay the course and sit through all that fighting. So I've been fighting a lot lately. I've been in a lot of like conflict with myself. We might call it battle. And maybe 2 weeks ago, I'd finished like a really hard workout, and I was sitting and I was hitting this moment of surrender. And what I was feeling internally was, let's close this thing making distracting beeping noises. What I suddenly got present to was disappointment. And like the way this tends to go, it didn't start like with this crushing amount of disappointment. It was almost just like a little bit like a light coming out of the fog a little bit. And I was like, oh, I'm so disappointed by this. And as I started to allow that, it was like water seeping into a crack. It was like, slowly started to expand and to make room for more. And I started to let myself feel the disappointment of everything going on in my life, feeling the disappointment, how disappointed I was with where I was in terms of my career at this point, feeling how disappointed I felt with the sales of my book, feeling how disappointed I was with the state of the Forge, the program that we run, and where it had gotten to. Feeling like a disappointment and just sitting in this experience of myself as a disappointment, feeling like, boy, what a disappointment I feel like as a son. What a disappointment I feel like as my brother is like a very successful radiologist, and I'm over here kind of struggling in the midst of everything that's going on. Feeling like a disappointment for the fact that we don't have a child yet. We want to have a family. We really want to have kids, and just experiencing that. The disappointment I felt with where my relationship is, where intimacy currently sits, and so like this process was very unpleasant, really, because all there is to do is to be with this experience. And as I sat in this, I could feel how much effort I put to avoiding this experience. In many ways, how my life has become, to some extent, shaded as a function of avoiding this, avoiding being a disappointment by striving, avoiding being a disappointment by performing and by grinding and by doing whatever I have to do to ensure that I come through, that I'm really, really good at something. Therefore, I won't be a disappointment. I won't feel disappointed. Just sitting with this disappointment was something brand new. Because instead of doing that, what I've done is create a life designed to avoid having to feel this in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to this piece I'm sharing is not really intended to like just garner sympathy or empathy or whatever. There's something else I have in mind. But before I get there, I'm going to just sort of conclude this a bit or distinguish what came about. And what I started to realize was like, as I felt this more and more, I didn't like it. It felt kind of crushing as I was in the middle of this bike ride, but I could be with it. I could allow it to exist. I could sit with it. And the more I could sit with it, the less I felt like I needed to do something to avoid its presence. The less I needed to like react to it to ensure that it didn't show up. And this is the nature of how breakthroughs happen. What happens is we discover through coaching, whatever process brings us here, that there's something in life that we've been spending our life resisting. And as we get better and better and better at building a life in resistance to that thing. And as we release that resistance, as we come towards a breakthrough, we hit this breakdown. And what happens is we hit a point of like it building up and piling up. And it had been piling up for months for me. Like the disappointment was just massive and it was hitting me on all sides. It just felt like one disappointment after another disappointment, everywhere. This client that I've been in conversation with for 6 months decided now's not the time. This thing that my parents had suggested fell through, like time and time and time and time again. And what happens is we hit this point where we can no longer keep it at bay and we finally surrender to it and we allow ourselves to be with that feeling. And in that moment, suddenly we no longer have to resist it. We suddenly become willing to just let it exist. And as soon as that happens, all of the strategies that you've built into your life to avoid this thing, they become obsolete. They're no longer a requirement. Suddenly, I don't need to do all of this stuff to alleviate or avoid or resist disappointment because now I can just be with it. And so where I'm left is with a new experience of freedom. None of my circumstances have changed. People will still cancel appointments. People had like 4 people cancel meetings I'd set up in one day. Oh my God, I got nothing to do on my calendar. But I don't have to hold it quite the same way anymore because I no longer have to be in opposition or resistance or allergic to this experience of disappointment. I can just allow it to be there. And so in changing what's going on inside and changing our relationship to this thing that we've been avoiding, our circumstances don't change. And yet suddenly what becomes available is an entirely new experience of life. So that's been kind of the breakthrough that I've been creating as of late, a breakthrough towards like freedom, a breakthrough towards like empowerment, and a breakthrough towards creating what's next. And really, probably we could fit all those into like, for me, the word I would use is like leadership, my own leadership, creating what I want to create in the world, but in such a way that I don't have to keep disappointment at bay. And I'll give you one example, and then we're gonna kind of shift to another conversation topic. One of the things that I'm setting out to do is to start doing more keynote speaking. To do that, I have to create like a sizzle reel. There's a whole bunch of stuff to put into place. I've never done this before. And while I'm in this state of resistance to disappointment, it makes it very hard to reach out to people and ask for support. It makes it very hard to reach out to people and put forward something that's not fully formed. It makes it very hard to get it wrong because all of those things are going to create an experience of disappointment for me. Once that falls away, I have a lot more freedom available. My choices become a lot less frictioned. They become much more fluid because I don't have to avoid that thing. And so I can go into them full on, as opposed to like with one hand tied behind my back or one hand up to guard myself, to protect myself from the thing or anything along those lines, all of that sort of stuff. And so that's what's available. That's what's available down this breakthrough. Okay. So from there, let's talk about empathy. And the sort of exercise we could talk about is one of, well, empathy is something we experience as we are being with something in someone else. So I'm curious what you might have felt as I was sharing about my disappointment. Some of you may have had an experience of like, cool, that's neat that he's doing that, but it doesn't really have any impact. some of you might have felt this desire to like say like, it's okay, Adam, that's crazy. You're not a disappointment. You don't have to feel that way. You don't need to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's certainly what I would have done. Like as I was sitting, if I was sitting here listening to or watching someone share about their experience of disappointment, of like how they felt about themselves, how they felt about their life, all of that sort of stuff, there would be a part of me that would want to reassure them, to like let them know that's not what's there for you. And this is the way our empathy operates, is the reason that that's so hooky for me. If I feel someone else being with that experience of disappointment, it's hooky for me because I have a hard time being with that same experience in myself. And so the extent to which you want to comfort me is the extent to which you have a hard time allowing yourself and other people to simply be with that particular emotional state. So we can start to find these little ways where our empathy gets hooked, it gets caught, and it becomes a bit of a flashlight, a bit of a bellwether almost for where we lack freedom, for where we are a bit hooked in and in resistance to particular emotional states. Here's another really good example. One of the things that's popular in the leadership and coaching professions is this desire to like help people reframe. I will reframe what's going on for this person so that they can have a positive experience. And what you're doing in those instances is you're empathetically feeling their sadness or their whatever it happens to be. And then what you are doing is you can't be with that feeling in yourself. You can't allow someone to simply feel sad because you don't like to allow yourself to feel simply sad. And so then what happens is you must reframe it. This is totally fine, by the way. All of this is fine. If you felt this part of you that was like, I don't want Adam to feel disappointed, I want him to know he's not a disappointment. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just valuable to recognize that there are going to be some things you might want in life for which an ability to simply feel disappointment might be necessary. If I really want to shoot for moonshots, I might have to be willing to experience some disappointment. Otherwise, I'm going to naturally have this desire, me, I'm not talking about you, but me, I'm going to have the desire to pull back a little bit on how far I shoot to mitigate how much disappointment I feel. If I take a really small swing and I don't hit it, I'm going to feel a little bit of disappointment. But if I take a big swing that really matters to me and I strike out, I'm going to feel a lot of disappointment. And the extent to which I cannot allow that will be the extent to which I'm going to naturally hedge myself and stop myself from playing as big as I might want to play. This is the nature of leadership. We want to support people to play bigger, but at the same time, because we can't see that we have these hooks, these stops inside of ourselves, we get a bit caught and then we inadvertently end up diminishing their possibility. I want to give you one more example for how this works. And this one's very simple. That it's kind of encapsulated in the saying, don't share your dreams with people that want to protect you from a broken heart. Having big dreams, big goals, big things that you want to strive towards, it's gonna set you up to experience heartbreak. If you go for what you really want, if you really allow yourself to pursue your desire, along the way, the gate that you have to be willing to pass through is heartbreak. As you aim towards something, there are chances that it won't go the way you want. In fact, assuming you're not putting your thumb on the scales, they're inevitable because that's part of the abundance of life. And so the extent to which I can't be with heartbreak in myself is the extent to which I'm going to seek to limit you having to be with heartbreak in yourself. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to invite you to play safer. I'm going to pull you away subtly, unconsciously, away from the biggest desire to help you play a little bit safer, and then invite you to play there. A lot of people think that part of the tragedy here is a lot of people think that they're actually supporting someone to play a bigger game while unconsciously being unaware that they're actually shrinking the game. They're diminishing the possibility that person can be with because they are shrinking their goal. They're trying to protect them from heartbreak rather than supporting them to play to win, to go all in towards what they really want in their life. So this is my intention here, is to give a bit of an understanding of how empathy kind of works, first of all, as a starting point, to start to see like an example of where that might be at play through me sharing about this disappointment and all of that. Now what I want to talk about is a little bit like, why bother? Why bother? Like if you're like me and maybe your baseline is sort of optimization, efficiency, what's the point of empathy? The biggest reason is because it's there. The biggest reason is because we can get to a particular place doing things a particular way. But for most of us, we start to find that the cost for achieving more results down the path that we're following is along a diminishing returns curve. If we get less and less, the more we start to try to put in. We can't get any further. We can't get any more juice out of this approach that we've put forward. And that approach tends to be one that usually, if you're kind of Silicon Valley or tech or like corporate executive leadership, usually your approach will be highly optimized and efficiency based. It's not so built on relationships. If it is, and you feel like your company is crushing it in relationships, you feel like there's no issue there, there's nothing for you to need to do, great. This probably isn't the conversation for you. This conversation is for people that want to create a shift. And so the starting point for like why work with empathy is so that we can understand it allows us to start to build relationship with people. And being in relationship with people is inevitably less efficient in the short term. Without a doubt, there's no way that you can avoid a breakdown in efficiency as you get into relationship with people, because humans are messy and emotions are irrational and illogical, and they show up and they're there in the moment. We all have had that conversation with ourselves where we say, I know I'm afraid, but I also know I have no reason why I need to be afraid. It doesn't make sense. Intellectually, I'm just going to pour a little bit more tea. We're going to hear that on the mic. Intellectually, it doesn't make any sense. I know I don't need to be afraid. And you've probably noticed saying that doesn't work. It does nothing. It achieves little at all. And so what we actually need, the way we actually get beyond fear, is by feeling it and allowing ourselves to sit with it so that we can be with it. Just like allowing myself to be with disappointment. So I don't need it to be gone. I can just let it sit there. Then I can take action with it as a partner. And that's what we do with fear. And so as a leader, if you're supporting people to create results beyond the pale, beyond the edge of what's currently possible in our paradigm, people are going to get scared. People are going to get frustrated. People are going to get sad. And attempting to sort of get them to take action without addressing that means that that feeling can never resolve itself. So they don't have anywhere that that feeling can kind of like complete, can get all the way back around to the other side and then just kind of dissipate. That's how emotions work. They need to be seen. We need to be able to feel them. And once we can feel them, they tend to move on. And then we get another emotion. And so empathy is the mechanism that allows that to happen. It allows me to be there with you rather than for you. And this is part of what I find is kind of lacking in a lot of like cognitive based therapeutic models, is you have a degree of separation. You have a sort of position of professionalism on the part of the therapist, which creates this gap. And so what you're left with is this experience of someone being there for you, but not so much with you. And so you're left sort of still, no matter what, kind of shouldering this burden on your own, which doesn't tend to work that well. Now, someone asked me today, I think it was in our group, they might have said, how do you balance empathy? And so it's important here that we recognize that there's sort of like a scale here. On the one side of the scale, we have ruthless efficiency. This is like, there's no place for emotions, leave them at the door. If you're scared, whatever, do it anyhow, get over it. Your emotions don't have to dictate what we do. So this is kind of like quite militaristic. It's very efficient and optimal. And like what this does is it creates us as people that are able to drive forward, but we're left pretty disconnected from our hearts. We're left without the ability to really be in much relationship with people, because instead of hearts, instead of how we feel, instead of the experience of the moment, which is kind of the essence of a relationship, we just mostly have efficiency and head-based thinking. And my spreadsheet document doesn't have much of a relationship with your spreadsheet document, no matter how much they have in common, because they're ruthless efficiency. That's what they're there for. So That's one end. We create a particular flavor of results that are reliable down that path, but we don't tend to have much in the way of relationship, and we tend to miss out on a lot of the things that can only be achieved through feelings, a sense of fulfillment in the long term, a lasting sense of equanimity and harmony and growth in our company, a sense of culture that we're here with each other, we're doing something, rich, rewarding relationships, all of that sort of stuff. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is like whenever someone has a feeling, we stop completely. Whenever someone has any kind of emotional content, we pull the e-brake, everything grinds to a halt, and then we sort of like sit and we cherish it and we like knit it a sweater and, everything grinds down. And this path is completely inefficient. This is the path where we don't have any resiliency. We don't have any ability to actually take action in the face of a feeling. This is the path where it's almost like entirely feelings based. So if we relate to this through the lens of polarity based work, where the terms masculine and feminine, not genders, but rather types of energy, masculine being highly structured, very linear and purposeful, that first end of the pole that I described is very masculine in its essence. The second end that I just described is very feminine, and the feminine energy is entirely of the moment. There is not really much directionality, so to speak. It's what is the moment guiding me towards in the moment and letting that be the entirety of the purpose. So neither of these is particularly ideal. They both have their positives and they both have their negatives. And in the modern era, we're doing a lot of work to kind of pull back from the ruthlessly masculine world that's been created, the world of the mind, the corporate world. But there's a bit of an overreactivity and push to the other side. And so a lot of people often wonder when we talk about empathy, the reason for why not leave this end of the pole is because we don't want to go to that end of the pole. And what we're really learning how to do here is to transcend this, to sort of learn how to metabolize an emotional state, to learn how to feel what is here to be felt and allow that to exist while continuing to take action. So the difference is that this masculine, this hyper masculinized approach that I've described is that I take action by ensuring I don't feel anything. And the hyper femininized approach that I've described is that I only feel everything and I don't take action until all of that has resolved itself and I feel good. So one moves forward in the absence of feeling, and the other kind of never moves forward in the presence of feeling. Neither of these is very well balanced. What we're seeking to create is the balance. This is what we're all striving for in any kind of polarity work, the balance of the yin and the yang. Being able to feel what there is there to feel and allow that some space and allowing us to be with that a little bit and allowing ourselves to actually like sit in that and take action while staying open-hearted. And this is what we're striving for. So this is where we actually seek to create balance. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to speak to a couple comments I've seen here. So first, Rob Fournier, you sent me a message. I'm not sure if you meant to put it in the chat or not, but I'm going to answer it here anyhow. You said, "Hi, Adam, have you done landmark or similar work?" The answer to that is yes. So my lineage of work is ontological in scope. Landmark is the place most people recognize that from the most, but I want to be super clear. Ontological work has been around since the antiquities. Plato, Aristotle, these early Western philosophers really put a lot of thought and began the process of ontology. What is it that makes a thing what it is? What is the nature of being? So some of my language, some of my words has some in common with landmark, but that's not my particular background. I have done some work with Werner, and I also will share, I have some concern about his being and some of the stuff that started to surface. And then Dave writes, "Hey, Dave." Dave writes, "Oh my gosh, my nesting relationship has those two poles, but they don't ever cross. It's one or the other always." Uh-huh. Yes, that's so true, Dave. So this is where most companies, most structures tend to be, is a pendulum back and forth between these two things. And consequently, what happens is people end up at first, they're like, yeah, our company is is like all purpose and there's no relationship. We got to change our culture. And they reactively go all the way to the other side of the pendulum. And then that doesn't feel that satisfying because nothing ever gets done. At first, it's like, oh, this is so much better. We're a corporate culture and we care about each other and it feels good to be with one another. And then they shift all the way to the other side. And it's just like, because they eventually get tired of that. And they're like, our bottom line's suffering. Things aren't working. So the way that we start to cultivate this middle path, this ability to like stay open-hearted, but whatever, begins by getting clear on our bias. And most of us that are really high performers, our bias will be towards not feeling anything. And if you have spent your life indexing towards not feeling things and just doing what has to be done, any amount at all of you going to the other side is going to feel like way too much. Like if I tell you that if growing up, I tell you that if you turn right in a car, you will die. And so you make this point of always turning left. And then 40 years down the road, we're trying to correct that. Turning right twice in a row during a day at first is going to feel crazy. It's going to feel like a great deal of effort. And it's going to feel like too much. This is way too much. All I'm doing is turning right because you're hyper-focused on it. You're hyper-focused on its impact. You're hyper-focused on the dangers of doing so because of the stories you inherited. All of that stuff. So the way we start to shift this is at first, you kind of come to an acceptance of knowing you're probably going to over-index a little bit and or feel like you are. And what we have to start practicing is learning how to feel what is there to be felt. So the practice we can begin to take on is one, noticing when we feel this need, this urgency to get stuff done, to be efficient. These are usually the best times to practice because those are the times when you're least likely, you're most conditioned to avoid the heart, avoid matters of relationship. So we can start to notice when that's showing up and let that be like the canary in the coal mine. There might be something here for me. So step one is to start to recognize those times when we feel like a real desire, a real need to get something done. And step two is to start to ask ourselves, what do I feel? Sometimes that question can be too heady for us. What do I feel? And then we're like, when I start to ask myself that question, I can get very caught up. Like, well, I don't know. I don't feel much of anything. It's not working. I'm not good at this. Screw it. And then I choose out. So instead, part of the practice becomes if asking that question becomes too hard, you can start to plug in like, well, what do I feel in my body in this moment? And I find it helpful because of the way I am to set a timer on my phone, to set some kind of timer like 3 minutes so that I know I don't have to do this for an hour and a half. I just have to give myself 3 minutes here. I set that timer and then I check in. And if asking yourself what you feel is too big of a step, start just with the body. What's the feeling in my body right now? Okay, well, my stomach feels a little bit tingly. Great. You are feeling something in this moment below the level of what has to get done. And that will provide you access into this realm of empathy. Because if you are feeling a little tingly in your stomach, the person across from you might also be feeling that. This practice does not require a partner, so to speak. It does not require someone else across from you. If all you do is start to like feel what's there for you in the moment, you become more like attenuated. You tune your antenna a little bit more to the matters of your own body, to the matters of how you feel. And as you do that more and more, you become better and better at starting to pick up on that. And that makes you a little bit more available when it comes time to be in an empathetic relationship. The way we improve our ability to empathize with others begins by improving our ability to feel our own feelings, to feel what we are feeling. What is here for me to feel in this moment? So that's how we practice this. Okay. We're going to shift a little bit. Dave, I would love it if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about that. Like what is the pendulum like, or what is the point that has you kind of jump across, or, anything else you can distinguish that you want to put in the chat? I think it'd be really awesome. Really love to hear from that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how empathy provides us access to our blind spots, because this is a great reason to take on empathetic work, to really be in this practice. So again, a lot of the times when well, let me take a step back and talk about justifications. So the leader who has successfully created a business on the basis of optimization, efficiency, put relationships kind of second, maybe pay them lip service, but like empathetic work, empathy, waste of time. Why bother? That leader has successfully created an entire world around them that's a reflection of that belief and that experience. And so it's really valuable to recognize that anytime someone like me or a book you read or a webinar you take, anytime it puts forward a possibility that's outside of that world that's been created, you're going to have resistance to it. And the way your resistance will occur will be a really well-reasoned justification for why not bother. Like, for why not? That sounds good, and I hear that, but it just doesn't seem like it's really worth my time. Or like, I just don't see it. I just don't think it's for me. So that will always be there. That ironically is the doorway to possibility for us. That is the sound of like new opportunity. When it's sort of like, yeah, I really agree with this, I'm going to do this thing, there's less available because it's already aligned with the direction you're already moving in. It's not a shift. It's not going to be a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift will always occur like, nah, I really don't think so. That just doesn't sound right for me. So it's helpful for us to recognize that's going to be the way it is. So if you're someone for which empathy would probably make a big difference, you will probably be certain that it won't really make much of a big difference. And the way we can, one of the points of access, one of the ways that we can kind of like get ourselves on board is to consider that when we practice this kind of art, it helps us see our own blind spots. The way it goes when I'm trying to empathize with someone, or more accurately, often when I'm in resistance to that, is going to help me see the parts of myself that are not yet fully integrated, the places where there's work I could be doing to become a more efficient, more effective, more powerful, more potent leader. So that's what we'll talk about here. This, I feel, is essential. There's a lot, because servant leadership is like a topic that's popular these days. It's like a sexy term. There's a lot of people trying to do things for other people. I want to do this so that my team feels a particular way. And that's noble. It sounds very noble, but typically what it actually lacks is enrollment. It lacks you seeing what's in it for yourself. And for all of the noble sounding declarations in the world, when it comes time to confront our fear, our own fear, so by which I mean, like, if you are trying to take on a step for your team so that they feel better, and it requires you facing your own fear, which any transformational change will require, in that moment, your own fear will win and defeat you, because your own fear is particular to you, but your reason for doing it is not. And you cannot defeat it doesn't work unless you have a reason for yourself. You have to have your own skin in the game. So this is very important, I think. I think it's really important that we get away from this idea like, I will do empathy for them because they require it. Stop doing that. You have to create a reason for you. And the reason I find very powerful is by doing this, I'm going to start to gain access into my own blind spots. I'm going to be able to see more of myself. I'm going to be able to unpack some stuff that previously I couldn't see, and it's going to make my relationships better. Boy, I would like that. So those are reasons to take this on for you rather than for other people. I'm going to talk about how we can see that and how we can work with that. What have you written here, Dave? So Dave writes, we're actually business partners as well. So it's kind of everywhere. Yeah, I have that too. And Dave shares, what I find is that we progress from feelings to spreadsheets as an arc and have a hard time getting back to feelings because of the arc and things going on. They become scary to revisit. We both have a stop around accountability for actions or the empathy for how we each operate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's especially challenging when we're in relational dynamics with someone who's also a business partner, because we get stuck, we get caught because we don't see how we're navigating in and out of our romantic or our whatever our relationship has to be, and then back into business and then back into that. It is really challenging. As a starting point, it can be really helpful to just check in like, hey, what do I feel? What is here for me in this moment? Beginning to build that practice from that state. Okay. So the way that we can start to use empathy and our resistance to it to build our blind spots is to recognize the places where we really want to move someone away from what's going on for them, the places where we really want to like reframe, the places where we really don't want to spend any time energetically, the places where we have a really well-reasoned argument for why not. And those places represent like the fact that you can't be with what's going on over there on the other side of the table represents it tells you that you can't be with that in yourself. So what you can start to do is you can start to recognize when this is happening. That's step one. It usually takes us a lot of practice to start to recognize when this is happening because we step over it quickly. It's very automatic. So the first step is to kind of like take stock. I really want to move past this. Okay, got it. That's the first step. Once you can catch that, the second step is to pause and ask yourself, like, what is the experience I feel that this person's having and that might be here for me to feel as well in this moment. And the more specific you can get this, the better. So usually people will say like they'll shortcut their process. They won't go very deep. Like, oh, it's fear. It's fear. They're just afraid. I don't like that they're afraid. I don't like fear. Great. But the more we can drill into something specifically, the closer we bring ourselves to it. As you name something, you bring yourself closer to it. The act of naming something brings you to it. And so one of the ways that we avoid coming into proximity with what we don't want to have to feel is we keep our naming of it general. It's fear, let's move on. So don't stop there. See if you can get further down. Oh, it's fear of being a disappointment. It's fear of heartbreak. It's fear of like being trapped, whatever it happens to be. See if you can really get in there. And then consider that that's something you resist in your life. You'll have a million good reasons for why resist it. The opportunity is to start to notice those reasons and notice the ways that you resist this thing. And if you take this on, you're going to start to discover like, wow, there's a lot of energy I put towards this. I'm devoting a lot of my cycles towards keeping this thing at bay. And that will start to show you your blind spot. Now, there's a caveat here that I'm going to speak to. And then we're going to start to wind down. Oh, there's one more thing I want to speak to, and then we'll start to wind down. So the caveat is often when people kind of start to hear what we're talking about here, they get concerned. And their concern is, but Adam, I don't think it's good. And I don't want to have to stop every time someone starts to feel sad and like wait for things to pan out and slow down. And what's happening is they're afraid of going to that other side, that other pole we just described. So it doesn't have to be that way. That's not what we're advocating for. That's not the way empathetic leadership actually operates. But hey, Andrew, until you get some practice on the other side, you have no capacity to calibrate. If I've turned left 100% of my life, and you say, Adam, you need to learn how to turn right, my immediate defense is going to be like, I don't want to always turn right. I don't think that makes sense. And that might sound a little silly, but that's how this stuff works. And so the practice becomes, we have to be willing to practice doing that for a while. So at first, it's going to feel inefficient to you. As you build new territory, like if we go back to where I started this conversation today, as I start to allow myself to feel more disappointment, at first it's going to feel kind of inefficient because I'm pausing, I'm taking time to just sit here and be like, I feel like a failure. I feel like a letdown. I feel like a disappointment. And as I'm doing that, I'm not doing the other stuff that used to be so automatic. I'm not doing the stuff that my fear of disappointment drove me towards. So I have to slow down. And as you practice with empathy this way, you're going to have to slow down at first. And it's going to prick you. so to speak. It's going to poke you, and it's going to drive up that desire to, like, we got to go. I'm losing time. This isn't, if all of the reasons that keep you from feeling what there's there to feel, they're all going to come up in a loud chorus and start singing in your ear. And the work is, instead of doing that, to just release it and to let yourself be here and to practice. And what you find as you practice with this is, at first you'll kind of go to the far direction, but then you'll start to learn, like, oh, I went too far to the right. Now I'm going to go back to the left. And you start to learn how to calibrate and discern for yourself. And what that allows is, as you do that more and more, as you develop the ability to calibrate your own emotional state and to be with it to the extent that works and that supports you, you become better able to support other people to do that. And so the irony here is that leaders have to be doing this work first if they want to support other people to do it. And the sad thing is that they don't want to do that. They just want to support other people. Most leaders are a bit unwilling, a bit scared, a bit resistant to taking that sort of stuff on. And so once I've learned, like, oh, I actually need to feel that much, but I don't have to feel too much more. There's a part of me that's going to want to wallow, but at some point I got to pull it back. Once you've started to gain some facility with that in your own life, it becomes easier to support other people in that same path. I think what I meant to say there was that same path. I like what you wrote here, Dave. Dave writes, not only do we have to start turning right, but there might be a part of us that needs to grieve not always turning left. Grieve can sound funny, can sound like a big thing, but like, metaphorically speaking, that's part of what it is. Like, but I love turning left. I'm really good at turning left. And as you start to develop a new range, the ability to do more than just one thing, at first you might feel kind of sad. You might feel like you're letting a part of you go. And you're not, you're actually expanding your range. And so what happens is that that part of you becomes less significant, but no less present. And it's that reduction in significance around a part of our old always on kind of ability, that reduction in its significance, we can feel some grief about that diminishing. Okay. Yeah, I want to talk just really quickly about, like, how empathy is related to our aging process. And then I think that'll probably be everything for today. So this is, I like to keep a lot of this conversation in the leadership organizational sphere, but I also want to bring it out of that, because for two reasons. One, I want to give you a lot of different places to look and to see how these things land for us, how this stuff works for us, how this operates. So that's the first reason. And by doing that, you're going to have more skin in the game for why practice this stuff. And the second thing is to help you see that if you practice this kind of leadership in one area of your life, it'll have benefits in all other areas of your life, because the way you've learned to be in one place is the way you've learned to be in other places. If you've learned to be very careful and safe with money, then you are probably also going to play careful and safe in other areas of your life. There's another conversation here, which is you've also learned to do the polar opposite. We always learn both sides, but never mind that for now. The ultimate point here is, if you start to practice in one place, you'll get benefits in other places. So let's have a sip of tea here. I'm getting a little dry throated. As you age, there's a couple things that happen. And one of them is that we tend to ossify. And ossify is a hardening. Literally, it means like we become kind of skeletal. Our bones harden. We become less flexible and more rigid, more bony, less flexible. So that process happens as we age. And one of the ways that happens is that as time goes on and we be humans and we go out into the world and we experience the world, we experience heartbreak. And we experience heartbreak a whole bunch of ways. But ultimately, what happens unconsciously is we learn how to close our heart a little bit in the face of these circumstances that tend to have broken our heart in the past. So I have a good friend. I want to provide an example here. I have a good friend who, they've got someone in their life that really drives them nuts, and they don't have any way of avoiding this person. This person is present for them. And what I notice is that this person, not my good friend, but this person is a person of integrity. They've learned, I have a way that is really important. I follow in my life, and I want to go into the world and I want to do that. And what happens is they notice as they stand in their truth, some people are hurt by that. I'm going to do what is important to me. This is the direction I'm going to take. And some people are disappointed by that. Some people are hurt by that. Some people are upset by that. I was really hoping you would do it my way. There's nothing wrong with that. This is a natural function of being a human, making a choice and going into the world with that choice. So none of this is wrong. But that person, Mr. Integrity, is going to feel an impact in their heart because of the choice they've made. They feel empathetically the disappointment. They feel the betrayal. They feel the letdown. That doesn't feel good. So the empathy structure, the empathetic mechanism that has me feel that stuff, I feel the impact of my choice over there. And now I'm left with an enviable choice. My choices are, one, I can stop doing what I'm doing so I don't have to feel that empathetic pain. If I stop standing for my beliefs so much, then you won't have your reaction. And instead, I'll start to live to satisfy your needs, not mine. And then at least I don't have to feel this. Okay. That's one choice. The other choice is because when I choose what is important for me, I notice you have a particular experience and then I have to feel that. What I will do is I will close my heart. I'll close my heart so I don't have to feel what you're feeling empathetically. And I will run it through my head and I'll justify it, but I'm not going to I'm going to create a barrier between myself and you. And that tends to be the way most of us learn. We tend to do a bit of both, but like that tends to be the more popular one as we age. So we close our heart and that allows us to continue making our choice, especially if we're someone with a lot of integrity as part of our essence. I close my heart, I close my heart, I close my heart. Each time I close my heart, it makes it easier for me to make the choice that I think is right, to ignore the impact of it, and to just go about the world. And as I age, what happens is my heart closes more and more and more, and I basically become like a curmudgeon. I stop caring about the impact of my choices. I stop caring about how I show up in the world. I stop caring about what you think. And what happens is I can live my life according to my own choices, but I basically become an island unto myself. I no longer have connection with you because I can't, because the cost is too high, because I have not learned how to simply be with the impact of my choices. I have never learned how to simply feel that when I make a choice, other people will be hurt, disappointed, let down, to not take that personally, but to not close my heart to it either. And so this aging process is what leads, it's part of what causes people as they age to move from a more progressive liberal mindset to a more conservative one. You know, it becomes less about like concern for others and more about like, I want to preserve what I have. It's a natural state. This is widely documented and recognized that people shift in their belief as time goes on. This is part of that reason, is that we naturally close our hearts. So empathy is one of the ways that you can practice staying young. You can stay more youthful in your being by noticing this stuff and by learning how to stay open with it. Because what that does, it allows you to stay more connected with the world around you. There's a consequence to this, which is that you have to now make your choices. You have to find your sovereignty and your integrity, while at the same time, you have to be willing to feel that not everyone's going to like that. That's the way of the master. That's the path of the transformational leader, because those people can give those that they lead an experience of being gotten, of being felt, of being understood. When I make a choice that impacts everyone, I can give you the experience that I really get. I really let land the impact of my choice on you in my heart. Empathetically, I can feel what's going on for you, and I give you the experience of like, I get it. And I'm really sorry. And I can feel how this sucks. And it's not just my words, but you can feel that I feel that. And we're going to make this choice all the same. And what that does is it allows you to come on board with my leadership, because now you are not left feeling like this guy just doesn't get it, but I guess I have to go along with him for a paycheck. Instead, you're left feeling like this guy understands, he gets it, and we're making this choice. Makes it much easier for people to come along with us, to come on board. So that's one of the ways that empathy can really support us. One, to stay youthful, stay open-hearted, to stay in relationship with the world around us, but also supports our leadership to be something other than just bulldozing, bullying, moving people forward, all of that sort of stuff. Okay. Let's have one last sip of tea. I'm going to make a request to finish up here, and then we'll finish up. So I would really like to hear some feedback. Put a comment or answer one of the polls that I put up in this group. What would you like from these calls? Would you like it to be primarily me speaking? Would you like to have more of our group in here? Would you like it to be a teaching on a particular topic, or would you like to have us bringing people on board and maybe doing coaching around them or something like that? The more you can share, the more this group can be co-created, and it can be something that doesn't just die like a flash in the pan. You know, there's a billion and one different groups on LinkedIn, but I'm really committed to making this something where we actually have some community that gets created. So these calls, these monthly calls, are not intended as like a way for me to market something at you or a way to do something. They're intended as kind of like a monthly seed around which our community can start to build and congregate. So I don't want this to be just me. I really would love some feedback. So anything you can share about that in the comments, in the group itself, anything along those lines, super helpful so that this isn't just me driving something forward. Second thing I'll share is that we'll be doing monthly Forge calls in this group as well. And what those calls, the Forge is the program I run. The calls are not about marketing that program. What we'll be doing is those calls will be open. You can come on, and we'll be providing support. So it'll be myself, Bay, my wife, who is amazing in this work, some of the members of our leadership team who have been getting trained by us and deepening their ontological chops. You can come and just watch and observe as we do work with people. You can come and get supported. You might be like, hey, I've got this situation going on in my life and I'm not sure, and I want can you support me with that? So what that'll do is it gives us a way to like apply some of what we're talking about here, but in the moment. And when you can see it in the moment, I find this stuff is way more powerful. It really like, holy mackerel. I can see both the resistance showing up, and I have that same resistance. And I can see how they got to a step beyond that. So I think it'll really support your leadership. I think it'll be really a lot more fun. It'll support us to have a little bit more of a sense of community. So the next time, these will be shared in the group. I'm going to make sure we put them out there. The next public call, it looks like it's on the 5th of August. So that is that fast approaching? That's a week this coming Monday. So I'll make sure that we post that. You can log in. The way that call, the Forge calls will be structured is that we'll post a Zoom link for you to join us. So, and then we may start to do that on these calls, depending on the feedback I get. But that way you can watch live in the LinkedIn group, or you can jump on the Zoom with us and get some support so we can move some stuff forward. It's going to be awesome. I'm really excited about it. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Rob. Thank you guys for your comments, your feedback, your partnership, really, for being with me as we start this off and kick this off. Thanks, everyone who tuned in after the fact. Thanks for kind of hanging out with me as we practice leadership in the moment. You know, I don't know how to do any of this. We're building something, and I think it's an important conversation, and I'm hopeful that we can create a bit of some momentum around this. So thank you guys for being here, and we'll catch you next month when we do our next call. Oh, and the theme for this coming month, probably not too surprisingly after how I started this off, is going to be disappointment. So we're going to talk about the impact of disappointment in our lives, how we work with that, what there is to do, the ways that disappointment shows up. You know, like one of the interesting things is disappointment usually shows up as a high degree of perfectionism and productivity. Like people with a lot of disappointment that they're keeping at bay are very good at generating results. So that's what we got coming for you. Look forward to seeing more of you guys. Take it easy and have a great weekend.